Does the Bible say that humans were created by advanced entities known as the Anunnaki? This biblical researcher and historian says absolutely.
But if you read the Eden story in Genesis, they are the stories from the Sumerian canon. It's a very layered story. That was the evidence that for me built up that there is a memory of what happened, of where we came from, who we were in contact with, and different cultures have found different ways of curating the same basic story, the same memories of the same traumas that our ancestors experienced, and memories of some of the same details about those who came, modified our ancestors, and governed over us. I refer to them as sky people because the glyph that's used on the tablets to indicate these beings simply indicates the sky. And the flow of the story tells you that they are people or beings who've come from the sky. And yes, those are the Anunnaki narratives. We're told, for some reason, we're told the location of Eden, where the humans are safe in this enclosed zone. And then we're also told that it's conveniently handy for some key mineral deposits. Well, who on earth needs to know that? Adam and Eve, in their blissful innocence in the Garden of Eden, don't need to know about key mineral deposits, do they? But there is another phrase in Genesis that says that the powerful ones put the humans to work. And you put those two together, and there's a little hint that that work wasn't like gardening. And yes, I think there's real evidence for ancient gold mining in southern Africa that appears to be a couple of 100,000 years old. Now, science says that our ancestors were here at that time, looking pretty much as we do today, but not quite as smart. Not smart enough to farm and build cities, but smart enough to work in someone else's mine. So yes, those stories do join up, but I think, you see, the word Anunnaki or sky people, it's interesting because it doesn't necessarily tell you that we're talking about a single demographic. Anunnaki, some people have suggested it would be helpful for us simply to translate that as astronaut, because that's what we're looking at. People who've come here from somewhere else, people who've come from the heavens. And you don't have to get far into the Mesopotamian stories or into the Genesis story before you realize there are factions and there's conflict, and you may have a number of ET species bumping up against each other. And by the time you get to the stories of the Sky Council or Heavenly Council, which exists in ancestral memory all around the world, and it's there in the Bible too, it's very clear you've got very different demographics. You've got energy-based beings, archonic beings, and then you've got physical visitors as well, all sitting in council, conflicting with one another over the management of Project Earth and Project Humanity. And there are other conflicts too around hybridization in Genesis 6 that suggest you've got a number of different populations, some who may be here purely for the gold, others because of other things to do with the planet, others may be for things to do with us. And that's all part of why there is this conflict rolling on in the background in our distant past and maybe even today.
If this is true, then who are our real creators according to the Bible?
If we start in Genesis 1, it's very interesting that's happening there, and it happens in other mythologies and ancestral narratives around the world, is we've got something that looks like a creation story, and everybody's familiar with the let there be light moment, and then we have the sun and the moon and the stars, and then the planet gets made and improved, and life on Earth is developed. Just go back and read that again, because before the first word of creation is spoken, the planet already exists. So before light, before sun, moon, stars, planet Earth already exists, flooded and shrouded in darkness. And many of the ancient narratives begin that way, with a devastated planet Earth and then somebody turning up to rehabilitate it. So Genesis follows that pattern. Many of the stories begin with the separation of the waters, the clearing of the sky. So all of a sudden we can see the sun again, and the moon and the stars. And then the waters are separated into salt water, fresh water, land is cleared. You can hear this in Mesoamerican African, Genesis, Mesopotamian stories, they all have these same themes.
Zulu.
These Zulu as well, that's right. And really interesting details about the land being cleared by vortices of wind. Well, that's in Genesis, because what happens is the powerful ones turn up in a ruach, a word that often gets translated as spirit, but a bit of translation work reveals it's a craft that hovers over the waters, and that's where they begin their work. Ruach gets used further in the Bible. It's in Ezekiel, it's in the stories of Moses, and Ezekiel gives us great detail on what a ruach looked like, what color it was. It was silver, it had a glass-like canopy, and he describes the wheels of the ruach in such detail that NASA has a patent on those wheels and uses them on some of its craft on Mars. So what you've got is beings arriving in technology who then do work on the planet. And these memorializations present the fact that this is an eyewitness account that our ancestors have curated. So they were already here in some shape or form. And what those who arrived in these stories do is not create our ancestors, but modify them. And that's how the story goes. So where life originated, I now hold the view that Francis Crick held, the co-discoverer of DNA. He believed that the genetic coding for conscious intelligent life landed on the planet because it's been seeded through at least this part of the cosmos. The Zulu have a wonderful story of that. And that theory is called Panspermia. And a lot of very serious credentialed scientists hold that view. The European Space Agency has spent more than $8 billion testing the theory by sending probes up onto comets. So the genetic coding arrives. Whenever it lands on a hospitable planet, it will result ultimately in conscious life. And then the stories of our mythologies seem to cut in when some neighbors appear, probably the result of the same panspermia, the same seeding, and then modify what they find here. And the story suggests that they found something along the lines of a primate and modified the primates into us. If you read the Mesoamerican version of the story in the Popol Vuh, it's very specific that apes and us share a common ancestor, and that apes and us were part of the same experimentation that was performed by these visitors. So that may be a bit of a paradigm shift. It certainly was for me reading that, but it caught my attention that centuries before Darwin, the ancient Mayan culture had made this connection. Weren't saying that we were descended from apes, but saying that we both were descended from a shared ancestor. And that's what science is telling us today in DNA research.
Is Yahweh the Most High God? Is he the one true God? Or are there many?
If you read the Yahweh stories, what I would say is this, that wherever we find Yahweh appearing as an active character in the texts, we are looking at an Elohim. We're looking at a powerful one. Yahweh refers to himself as a powerful one. Yahweh is referred to as a powerful one in the 10 Commandments. You shall have no other powerful ones. Worship only Yahweh. Joshua says, reject the powerful ones that Abraham and Sarah and your ancestors served on the other side of the river, and serve only Yahweh. Yahweh gets really teed off, apparently, when a king who's broken his back wants to know if he's going to live, and he sends his servants to try and get a prognosis from the powerful one of Ekron, a neighboring place with foreigners living in it. And Yahweh says, is there no Elohim here that you could talk to, pointing to himself? So there's a proof text that Yahweh is an Elohim. And in all the texts where he is an active character, we're looking at a powerful one.